I don't know, Nigeria, that word cabal has now come to stay in our political vocabulary. But there is nobody who will hold a very high office. Even in the private sector, I don't have some key people around it. No matter how knowledgeable you are, you need people to sometimes give you certain suggestions, sometimes look at something differently. So there's absolutely nothing wrong in the president having some key leaders that he can. Not everybody will easily have access to the president. In one way or the other, he may have some friends, some old colleagues, and so on. The problem we have is that, and that's why we use this name cabal and put some kind of negative connotation to it, because they advise and their suggestions to their own benefit. If they are advising the president and the prime minister on general things that will bring benefit to the public, nobody will frown. But why should the president have a cabinet of ministers? They are all cabal, because they meet in the executive council to conspire. That day, I remember vividly that I called General Buhari. Results were coming in. Then I witnessed an incident that happened at the National Election Center when Elder Rubebe was representing me, challenged Jiga, the chairman of the National Independent Electoral Commission, and it was very bad. And people said the country will go into crisis. We witnessed all that. So there are some of my aides, some ministers that there were there, some of my aides were there, and people were talking random. How could it be talk? I was just listening to people. Everybody is making one suggestion or the other, and so on. I remember Ngozi was there, the finance minister, Attorney General, I think was also there. Ludafa was there. This Peter minister then. So it was Chinuka that tweeted, and it went viral. So the stories of cabal pushing left and right, I don't think it was quite correct. That was something like that. Then you ask whether there are certain things I would have loved to do, but I couldn't do. Yes, I was there for 5 years. So definitely you cannot exhaust what you love to do for your country. But I don't need to lament over such issues. The people who have taken over will continue to run the country the way.
Former President of Nigeria, and I'm actually personally looking for this opportunity to exchange with you some of the experiences. Yeah, okay. I know that the focus of this conference sure as a leader, you're usually concerned yourself with policy making, but the implementation lies within the purview of the civil service. And I think when we talk about governance, we need to basically look at how civil service is quite sufficient and efficient enough to take certain policies that you've been able to implement. How do you deal with some of the challenges within the civil service to ensure that they're able to take up certain policy initiatives that you have initiated during your tenure before?
And that, why in Nigeria they call it the civil service? The private sector don't have civil service. The civil service is to make sure that political leaders, be a governor, be a president, don't make mistakes. And that is why you have bureaucracy in the civil service. In the days the civil service was the civil service. If, for example, a country or a state want to handle a big project, could be an engineering project, build house or bridges, or first they will pass all those things through the people engineers, level 9, level 10. Then it's connected to the principal of because of the volume of work they do. Because the permanent secretary works with a minister or a commissioner, who is the political head of that department or government, that ministry. The permanent secretary heads the civil service. And of course, as the president, if the permanent secretary is not doing too well in a particular department, you can always ask the head of service to move the permanent secretary out to another place. Some of the directors are professionals. They can be moved from one ministry to the other. Very few directors that stay in just one ministry till they retire. So if the president or the governor is focused through his ministers and his permanent
pour avoir un parcours aussi inspirant que le vôtre. Pas seulement en devenant président, parce qu'il faut se le dire, on ne peut pas tous devenir président, mais vous avez impacté avant votre présidence, pendant votre présidence, et aujourd'hui vous continuez d'impacter à travers votre fondation. Qu'est-ce que nous devons faire en tant que jeunes pour avoir ce parcours
Yes, in Africa we know, in fact that's why because of technology. When we were in those days, talking about the world's a global village. With technology now, the world's a global conference center. Just you cannot view yourself in it. Like all kinds of planning for the club children of the Britain. And it became a dominant economic essay that government patterned let us almost gone. So if you plan for me, you're wasting time. We have to plan for our grandchildren as a continent. So the youth are very, very, very valuable. But they must be in position to be trusted and also to hold high offices. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. When we don't plan for our children, we're planning to fail. What an amazing statement to announce to end on. And as we exit this moment from President Goodluck Jonathan, I just want you to have a final message for your peers, for city leaders in Africa, for leaders in the global governance, because we're talking about governance in the Sahel, but it's intricately linked to global governance, the way our world is being governed today. And of course, governance from an Africa, from a regional perspective. If you had a last word for how you think leaders, whether at the continental, national, or global level, should behave, one word for each of those layers, for us to succeed as a people and as a world, what would those final words be?
Thank you. It's just one word for all the layers, actually. But leadership is leadership. There's so much literature on leadership. I sometimes don't even read, because sometimes what is written practically doesn't go that way. And because I used to tell people that I remember, was it in the 80s? Yes, I had a friend. That was the beginning of use of computer for word processing. Just came into Nigeria. Then we were using electric typewriters after the manual typewriters. And all of my friends want to live from my community, established the word processing office in Port Harcourt, and so many people were going there to do word processing. So the small business was booming. Then he wrote a book on management of small businesses and launched the book. Then, because he had his computer, so he also developed a magazine on marriage counseling, how to counsel husband and wife. Do you know that year his business collapsed? His wife divorced him. So sometimes I try to separate the theoretical things we read from practical realities. So, but basically, for us in Africa, who are privileged to be leaders, especially at the national level, first and foremost, you must take your citizens as the most precious commodities that you have. And you must take the whole of the country as a garden. And if you take, it's just like if you have a garden, you wouldn't want to see any rubbish anywhere in the garden, you want to remove it. So if you take your country as a garden, then you want to do the best. And probably that's the difference between the countries that are ruled by kings and emirs, compared to the countries that are governed by so-called elected political leaders. Those kings and emirs see the whole country as their own asset. It's not the top level of practice of governance that we want to see, because we have made to understand that democracy is the best. It may not be democratic. Probably you may never be minister of finance or whatever, except you are from the ruling house. But then, in terms of taking care of the people generally, they say they do better, because they see every part of the country as their home. The problem we have in Africa is that political leaders tend to see only a section of the country and some of the citizens as their own. The rest they have to get off. They don't bother. Just like this lady's book that I made reference to, the white South African journalists, Our Turn to Eat. So that is the fundamental problem. So after that is trust. We must live our lives in a way that our citizens will trust us. If, as a president, your lifestyle and the lifestyle of your family members is so glamorous, how would you tell the ordinary person to go and tighten his bed? Then you are hypocrite. So I said, in the State House, it is only that bread that will be served. So if you know your president eats that bread, you will be encouraged to eat it. And we will start growing rice. But the imported rice into the country more expensive. And the imported rice, frankly speaking, some of them have stayed in those countries for upward of 5 years, 10 years in their silos. So no nutrients again. The locally grown one even richer in terms of food value. But people, because of the spoiling, so why this stuff? So I said, look, in the State House, you will not cook anything other than rice grown in Nigeria. You must use yourself, the way you do things, to communicate to the people. And you convince people faster than speaking to them from morning to night as if you're a Christian. You don't need to sound nice. You have to demonstrate. So, for leaders at all levels, our lifestyle is critical. And people must not take money they can't spend. That is greed. It's worse than corruption. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Now we know what to do, how to use it. But I wanted to very quickly say that, the president, we negotiated for him to bring us some copies of his book, My Transition House. So I'm encouraging all of you, it's out there at the reception desk. Take a moment and get a copy of yourself. It's at the reception desk. And the president was so gracious to make sure that we get a pass. So please get a copy of yourself.
To cultivate humility, foresight, and servant leadership, as discussed in the last conversation. As we gather here today, as we are gathered in this room today, I'm sure many of us or all of us are aware that millions of people across the Sahel are facing unprecedented challenges. That is a statement of fact. From poverty and inequality to climate change and insecurity. Yet we also know and are very much aware that the Sahel is a region of immense potential, rich in natural resources, cultural heritage, and resilient communities. The next panel will explore how governance can be a catalyst for unlocking this potential and achieving shared prosperity for all. And to Guy, Director, Good Governance, Ministry of Justice, Senegal, the moderator. Please help me welcome Mr. Alassane.
Bonjour à tous. Voilà, donc je vais interpeller pour les différents intervenants qui vont venir. Et je pense qu'on a Nana Sissoko, vice-président.
We have His Excellency Senator Bala Mohammed, Governor of Bauchi State. Mr. Lamin Maro, Director General, African Development Bank. His Excellency Anadif Saleh Mahamat, former Special Representative of the Secretary General and Charles, former Minister of Foreign Affairs, Chad. And of course, our dear friend and big brother, Mustafa Njai Taf, CEO and founder of TAF.
Les ressources que nous avons également, la stratégie qu'on doit mettre en place pour une gouvernance transparente, pour que les prochaines générations qui viennent puissent en profiter. Et je vous passe la parole, M. Nana Sissoko, vice-président of the Women Leader Platform of Mali. Ah, il n'est pas là. Ah, d'accord. Bon, oui, il n'est pas là, on va passer la parole au suivant. Monsieur Bala Mohamed, gouverneur de Jstv, vous avez la parole.
Thank you, Your Excellencies, and distinguished members of the panel, and all the invited guests. First, I must thank the Goodluck Foundation, my boss, the former president of Nigeria, and of course the UNDP, the global body, and our dear sister that we're very proud of, and all the international bodies, organizations that package this very outstanding conference. I think all the things that need to be said have been said in the past. It is difficult to talk after your boss has spoken. Mr. President, and of course the Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations in charge of the UNDP has given us all the hallmark of this conversation on governance. But certainly, since this is specifically on prosperity, prospects, and what we need to do in order to ensure that we get the best out of our resources, we still have areas that where we can talk. I will be talking mostly from the perspective of the subnational. I'm grateful that the international bodies and Goodluck Jonathan Foundation gave opportunity for those of us that are working at the subnational level for the first time talking in this kind of international arena where governance are being discussed. Because majority of Africans in the Sahel live at the subnational level and of course within the local governments or local authorities. So we face these challenges of poverty and lack of growth. Everything is about governance and management of scarce resources. Our resources are not even scarce, we have abundance, and yet we are living in poverty, abject poverty. And of course it has to do with so many factors. I will also give a little testimonial on my own part as a governor of a state that has over 8 million people, and to underscore how scarce resources can be managed to at least make a difference, leave legacies and landmarks. It all has to do with the planning and understanding, coming with the baseline studies, knowing where you are and where you will be, and how you will deploy scarce resources to carry on or carry along the bureaucracy and to leverage on extra resources from donor agencies, from the federal government, and to raise IGR. And of course, deploy the human capital that is available. And if it is not available, try to leverage on consultancy and other means so that we can do good procurement, managing resources in a manner that it will make an impact. We have so many resources. In my state, we have almost everything. Good arable land, over 4.2 million hectares of arable land that are mostly reserve forests because they cannot be developed. And we have mineral resources like gold, tantalite, lithium, and all the other precious materials. But certainly we work under the federal government where such things are under the exclusive reserve of the federal government. It is just contingent on any government to find ways and means of partnering with the federal government. And that's why we set up special part of vehicle where we become participants, even though we are only restricted to deployment of community agreement when people come as licenses from the federal government. Again, we have opportunity for renewable energy and so on and so forth. But certainly, we seem to be stagnant, staying where we are. Maybe the perception of governance, as explained by President Jonathan, and well elucidated by the Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations, our regional director for UNDP, has really placed everything on the table. How do we move from there in the midst of gravity? How do we add value? So what we did, or what we must do, is to be able to know where we are and what we have on the ground and how to take strategic means to be able to achieve our desired objective. So you must have a plan. You must know where you are. You must carry the youth and the women You cannot make empty promises. Right from onset, as political leaders, we must be careful of our promises, so that there will be trust, so that you will know you will deploy your scarce resources to achieve what you have. We came in when we had only 300 million naira as IGR in my state, with a population of 8 million, because there have been a lot of leakages, a lot of sharp practices in the management of IGR. At a point, IGR is receiving the exclusive reserve of the government. It is not deployed or imputed in the budget. And we came not minding the informal sector that is producing most of the IGR, just the taxes. And then you see you cannot criminalize poverty, because we have a state where most of the people are not educated in the formal way, but they are knowledgeable. So we have to really prepare our youth in agriculture, because you cannot mock up all those people that are not employed and are not employable in the context of Western parlance of governance, because they cannot work in the office, they cannot speak English, but they are very good in terms of knowledge. They are exposed even in Quranic education. Their brains are opened, and they are always open to media. And so you have to be careful. They become so willing tools in terms of indoctrination. So we had an agri policy that really created ways and means for the young people to be put back to the farms, giving startups, so that at the end of the day they become demonstration farms. We really created a lot of prosperity along that line, where young people, graduates, or those with diplomas will be able to employ their kids and kin. At the end of the day, they will make 20, 30 million naira. And that's a lot, from poverty to prosperity. And in Solid Mineral, we came up with a policy whereby we don't allow our community leaders, our traditional rulers, to sign a community agreement for the foreigners, mostly the Chinese, to come and cut away our common resources. We become part and parcel as a state government with the process of the business, so that we take equity. At the end of the day, if you aggregate what we are getting in terms of equity, you will see that we are making so much money away from what we are normally getting from the federal corpus, from the federation account. And the activities itself puts our own young people, our women, on the threshold of deep understanding to explore their potentials, to be part of governance, to be respected because they are really connected with the government. And by so doing, we are able to create awareness that governance is about collective responsibility. I will give you an example of the COVID when it came. It was almost unheard of for people not to be allowed to go to mosque. But because we brought the emirs, we brought the religious leaders from all persuasion, we were able to convince people not to go. We opened halfway. We didn't close everything in terms of going out to act anywhere, because most of our people get their daily meal daily. And so at the end of the day, there was clear understanding. Even in terms of insecurity that is stopping people from going to work, from going to farm, we make sure we use the same means of connectivity that we created between local authorities, community leaders, to know that we will police our villages, we will police our farms and our forests in a manner that we held our traditional rulers, our religious leaders accountable by sheer respect and giving them responsibilities that are outside the provision of our Nigerian Constitution. By so doing, we have cells that are giving us information and we are collaborating. And when we stop the practice of informers that are collaborating with those that are driven by poverty, we give the right of way, I would say, for those that are coming to adapt and do all sorts of criminality. So the whole issue of governance is looking at the planning stage, the understanding of your problems and challenges at the Sahel. The Sahel has so much potential. We are bombarded by House. Because the Sahara is moving, and if we don't stop it, definitely so agriculture and so on and so forth will not be there. And looking at our own limitations and inadequacies in terms of manpower. Manpower is very low. I know my boss has spoken about trust in the bureaucracy. In some of the state and local government, we don't even have the bureaucracy. The orientation is that sometimes they don't even go to office. And as a governor, at the subnational level, the most important thing is supervision. You must be there 24/7. I had the opportunity of being at the federal level, and I came to learn life with the goodwill of my boss here, with all humility, because I only came to Abuja to be a senator, and later I became the minister of FCT. So I was exposed to the act of governance, partnership with the international bodies, partnership with local authorities, looking at the health system, looking at the educational system, looking at the key for showing deliverables in terms of governance. And of course, that has helped us a lot. And I think at the local level or at the subnational level, we need to know that leadership should be driven by knowledge, by clear understanding of what you are, by knowing the basics of what are your problems, and deploying those little resources you have judiciously. My boss has spoken about the issue of procurement. We know most of the common people or the ordinary people look at us with suspicion because of the prevalence of our invoicing. Project that can be done with 100,000, it can go to 1 million. So, and this is true, it's a testimony I'm giving. We built over 7,000 classrooms to remove the prevalence of out-of-school children in my state. Through collaboration with international bodies, the UNDP has been there to build our system, UNICEF and the rest, and we show fidelity, sincerity, in terms of government in such a manner that we are trusted. Trust is the key word. Because there is nothing we are looking for. If somebody becomes a senator, I rose as a director in the system at the federal level, and I was given an opportunity to the minister of the Federal Capital Territory with a lot of temptations from somebody that hardly had anything in common with that President Jonathan, who are not even in the same party. We don't share even the religious faith together. Even my Lord is different from him. And he gave me the opportunity to come to Lion Night. So I was driven by the passion to live legacies and landmarks. So leaders must impute their own end result. What would they be? Would they want to be somebody like Jonathan, or they want to be like others, where they are seen with disdain, where they are so much that they don't need? So our own passion is to make sure we live legacies and landmarks and do things better. I don't talk about my own predecessors. What I did was to draw a line. In terms of accountability, I asked them to fear God. I don't have to go to court with you because it's the responsibility of the police. But certainly, I will not waste my time. I must hit the ground running. From day one, I'm looking at my own period of 4 years. So I thank you for the opportunity.
Merci beaucoup pour cette belle intervention. C'est très riche, hein, donc on vous remercie. On va essayer de passer la parole à Madame Fatou Diagne, qui travaille également au centre de Human Rights. Madame Fatou Diagne, on passe la parole.
Merci, Monsieur Guy. Nadine, where are you? I have to say something at the last minute, but I think it's important that our voices are heard. I think since yesterday we noticed the gap in terms of the panels. I believe everybody mentioned it and reiterated that we have the competencies in the region, in Africa. But I believe that in most of the positions, we still have men. And that is why in these conferences, the representation gap is visible. So my colleague from Mali is not around. I was asked to say a few words about the topic. I'm going to intervene in the next panel. But I just believe that the issue of governance is important in terms of the economic governance. And what we've noticed on the continent is the playing field is not level. And unless we really look into our policies and make sure that they are engendered, I think the issue of discrepancy will still remain. We talked about all the issues around oil and gas, the natural resources. I think often we forget that the world is transforming and we need to look into the digital world, the data. Today we're talking about data. And in most African countries, we're overlooking that sector, which is very important, and it's a sector that is growing very fast. And I believe that this is also a wealth that we need to manage properly. When I looked at the countries around Senegal, Gambia, I know quite a lot. When you look at our policies in terms of land, we talk about agriculture. Women don't own land. The land tenure, the laws are still really, following the traditional route. Today, we need to do some reforms in terms of land tenure. Women don't generally inherit land in many parts, especially in the rural areas, because we have the system where men inherit the majority. And what it does in general is that women will cultivate the land, but they will not be able to own it. And what happens? If you need collateral to go to the banks, you will not be able to get it. So what we've seen is that women are doing a lot of the small businesses, but we need to scale up those businesses. And for that to happen, we need to have banking sectors that are receptive, but more importantly, we need to have governments that are really putting in place policies that will respond to the needs, but also reform some of the traditional way of doing things to ensure that, land is owned by women, in the rural areas especially. And also, I'll talk about local content. When I was in Senegal, I was sitting in what they call the Jstv. In the extractive industry, we have a tripartite kind of committees where you have civil society, extractive industries, and government. And what we realized that is most of the resources that were levied, in the mining sectors particularly, they were percentage that would go back to the communities for rehabilitation, for support, for education, for some other social services. But what we realized that for many years, the government will not redistribute that equally. And in most of the communities that are affected by, these mining sectors, what we've seen is that women, have lost their livelihood because most of the agricultural areas have been used now for mining, and they have not been rehabilitated properly, and many women are displaced. So I think these are also areas that we need to look into when we're talking about the extractive sector and some other minerals that are being exploited in our different countries. I came to this panel just to say that really governance is an important thing, but we need to be deliberate about the policies if we want things to change. But representation also should not just be a lip service. We need to ensure that the policies that are put in place are gender responsive to ensure that these resources that we've been talking about all these 2 days are distributed equally and ensure that women have their fair share. But importantly, I think in our countries, if you want investments to grow and women to participate, we need to look into our banking sectors. The last point I want to mention is the Gambia, for example. Today, if you want to take a loan, it's 28%. nobody will do proper business where banks will give you a loan with a rate of 25 to 28%. Because government should intervene and ensure that women have proper collateral if you want them also to be part of, the development. Yeah. So I just want to stop there. I was not supposed to be in this panel, but I thought with Nadine's intervention that I will just say a few words. Unfortunately, we don't have enough women in this line of gatherings, and I just want also to say something about the Sahel, the women of the Sahel, the civil society. I know we have not heard about that. Given my background, I work with people still in the ground. I know sometimes it's very difficult for them to speak out. Freedom of expression has been really a problem in Burkina Faso, in Niger, in Mali. We've heard a lot of detention. We've heard a lot of distress. Yesterday, Mr. Gadio talked about the issues around the Pearl. I think we need also to look into the human rights dimension of the Sahel crisis, because what is happening will affect the economics, but what is happening, I think we cannot do we cannot build peace if we overlook what is happening on the ground. And people are suffering, women are suffering, and many women are displaced because of what's happening. So I just want also to share that from the ground, from the colleagues that have been working with. Lawyers are detained in some of the countries for just speaking out. Lawyers have been detained for just defending people. So we need also this forum to have that as part of the takeaway. Yes, peace, but justice is the underlying thing if you want peace and development. Thank you.